Okay, so today we are going to be going over Chapter 1 of developing cybersecurity programs and policies. So our objectives for this chapter are going to be to describe the significance of the policies. We are going to evaluate role policy plays and the role that policies play in corporate culture and even society. We're going to articulate the objective of cybersecurity related policies and identify the different characteristics of successful cybersecurity policies, as well as define the life cycle of a cybersecurity policy. Okay, so the objective of a cybersecurity policy is the end goal is to protect each of us, right? Our economy, our critical infrastructure, our country. Protect all of that from harm that can pretty much result in maybe, say, compromise or misuse, destruction of information, or even our information system. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about kind of why this is so important to us. What would happen if we didn't have these policies? Are these important to our nation, to humankind, etc.? Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So, while looking at this, you may think that the Torah and the Bible, not really a policy, right? Not exactly. They technically are. So a synonym for policy is going to be law or a code of justice. What are policies, laws, etc. meant to do? To guide human behavior under certain conditions or environments, or even when certain conditions can't be foreseen, right? So when you think of it this way, the Torah and the Bible are technically written as policies. So why do you think that a 3,000-year-old document is still in place today, right? A policy, 3,000-year-old policy. Why are they still here? Well, maybe because they are open to interpretation, maybe because they've stood the test of time. Maybe they are written somewhat vague. They're open to interpretation, like I said. So maybe that makes a good policy. Just something to keep in mind. So the first documented attempt at creating a code to preserve order, some examples from the Torah. So not to use false weights and measurements, not to charge excessive interest, to be honest in all of your dealings, to pay wages promptly, to fulfill promises to others. Okay, so none of those are going to change over time. We aren't talking about you have to be honest over the internet, right? Because that would limit us to a time now, whereas these are somewhat vague, but they apply to life BC, AD. Now we are still coming across like people who should be honest. It's not precise. Okay, so sorry. Oh, one thing I wanted to reiterate that these policies have stood the test of time. So when we are creating policies, I'm not asking you for them to stand the test of time, but this is something that you should take into consideration when creating policies. Is it something that can stand up for a while, or is it going to have to be rewritten every month, every year, etc.? Another one, the U.S. Constitution as policy. So, if you were to describe the U.S. Constitution as a policy, would it be a good policy? Would it be a bad policy? Maybe a good policy because there is room for change, i.e. amendments, right? And like, do the amendments, what am I trying to say? Sorry. Is it good practice if your policy has amendments? Well, yes, actually it is. It has to have that room to grow, but also to stand the test of time. Okay, so policy today. So we're going to be talking about corporate cultures. Are corporate cultures good? Are they bad? Maybe both. Say a bad corporate culture is that it's known for being a men's club, right? They're kind of misogynistic. Women aren't accepted all the time, or they're treated as they aren't treated as equals. So that would be considered a corporate culture. So corporate cultures are the shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterize a company. There's going to be 3 classifications for that. Negative, neutral, and positive. So some ways that corporate culture might be negative is if there's a hostile work environment. Maybe they have a dangerous work environment. It's just plain not safe. OSHA hasn't been in there in years, and it's just not a good place to work, right? Maybe it's not even emotionally safe. There's lots of harassment. Employees are devalued and made to feel worthless, right? That would be an example of a negative environment. But we also have a neutral environment. So the company neither helps nor hurts their employees. They just kind of let their employees go there, do their job, and then leave. They're not rewarded. They're not punished. They just neutral. Okay. And then a positive corporate culture. This could be a welcoming workplace. Maybe they value their employees. They value their customers. They make great advancement opportunities. So they might help you pay for school, or they make it possible for you to go to school by working with your schedule. Or maybe they just even provide training for you to move up the ladder. So that would be an example of positive corporate culture. And then our guiding principles. So guiding principles are going to reflect the corporate culture, and they're also going to set that tone for the corporate culture. Wow, I can't talk today. Corporate culture. There we go. Okay. So essentially, if your guiding principles are completely different than what you want your corporate culture to be, that is the reason, because your guiding principles don't match up or don't align with your corporate culture. So we will get a little more into that. But so what is cybersecurity policy? So the role of a policy is to classify its guiding principles, shape behavior, and provide guidance. So a cybersecurity policy document that states how an organization plans to protect its information assets and information systems and ensure legal and regulatory compliance. So the objective of this policy is to protect the organization, its employees, and its customers. So an explanation of how cybersecurity policy would protect a company's customers may be an acceptable use policy that states that employees are not to access their personal email because their personal email isn't protected by the company's firewall. So if an employee was to open a personal email and cause a data breach, well, then that would put a company's customers at risk, right? And their information at risk. So let's kind of talk about an asset. So an asset is going to be any resource with a value. So that could be a computer, that could be documents, that could be a picture up on the wall, right? Anything with value. Now, an information asset is any information item, regardless of how it is stored, whether paper or digital. So this could be, so your digital stuff could be, or even paper stuff could be customer data, your employee records, IT information, health records, reputation, brand, recipes, etc. Okay, So moving along, defense in depth. So how do we make sure that we have a hardy policy, right? And hardy defense. Not even policy, hardy defense, okay? So this is going to fall in line along with what we want as a cybersecurity professional. So let's start with administrative, okay? So this is going to be your non-technical. It would include your policies, risk management, end user and staff training, maybe training to show your employees what a phishing email looks like, how to catch them, anything along those lines. Your physical security, so this is going to be your cameras, locks, security guards, etc. Anything meant to protect your physical company, right? Your perimeter security, so this is going to be anything that is going to prevent someone from remotely accessing your information. So setting up firewalls, intrusion prevention system, have segmentation, VLANs, etc. Network security. This is going to be control plane policing. So control plane policing is a Cisco feature that essentially allows users to configure a QoS or quality of service filter that manages traffic flow of a control plane and packets to protect the control plane of Cisco iOS routers and switches. So this is going to prevent recon and DOS attacks. So it can help maintain your packet forwarding and protocol states despite any attack or heavy traffic load on your router or switch. Your host security, so what is on your desktops and your laptops. These are just as important, right? Protecting your devices with anti-malware and virus protection. Your application security, so testing how good an application practice is. So this can consist of fuzzing. You know what fuzzing is? No? Well, let me tell you. So fuzzing is actually the act of bug finding, right? So you find faults and you identify them as quick as possible. Oops, sorry. Okay. And then data. This is all about encrypting. So making sure your data is safe when it is at rest, meaning it's not being used, or when it is moving across your network. So we are doing that with encryption. Now, with this, if we'll call them pillars, right? If one of them was to fall, that would put our whole entire company at risk, right? So we have administrative, we have physical security, we have perimeter security, we have network security. Host security, nope, we just decided, hey, we have everything else, and we have application security and data protection. We are good. We don't need to worry about malware protection or virus protection. Bad choice. We need all of these, right, for a safe and robust defense. Okay. So successful policy characteristics. This chapter does kind of jump around a lot, so I do apologize. I'm trying to make sense of it all for you. But this is just chapter 1, where it gives you bits and pieces of all the chapters to come. So that's kind of why we are jumping all over the place, but bear with me. So let's talk about some successful policy characteristics. So what is going to make a good policy? Well, all of these are going to make a good policy, right? So a good policy is going to have these 7 characteristics. If some of these don't really make sense to you or you need to put them into context, the book actually has some great examples of each of these in real life scenarios. So, endorsed. Nothing is worse than having management disobey your policy, right? So, endorsed means that managers, CEOs, CFOs, whatever, they are going to support your policy. They are not against it. They are for it. if you have management that disobeys your policy, there's nothing worse. If your employees are seeing your management disobey the policy, guess what they're going to do? They're going to follow suit. They're also going to disobey your policy, right? It can be detrimental to your policy. Relevant. So the policy must support your guiding principles and the goals of an organization. So the policy must apply to those that you are writing the policy for. And if the policies are not relevant, then they're going to be ignored. They're going to be dismissed. It's going to make employees question management. Like, why the heck are they creating this policy? This doesn't apply to me. Whatever. Okay. Realistic. So the policy makes sense. Kind of self-explanatory. Following along with being relevant, policies will not be followed if they aren't realistic. People are just going to disobey. Okay, so next, attainable. The policy can be successfully implemented. So, with attainable, this means that you cannot ask employees to do something that is out of reach or impossible. You don't want to set up a policy for failure. And one way to prevent this from happening is to talk to people whose jobs this policy is going to impact, right? Get their feedback and their take on it. Adoptable. The policy can be changed. So like we talked about with the Constitution, right? Amendments. So a good cybersecurity policy knows that cybersecurity is not always going to stay the same, right? That's one thing I love about cybersecurity is it's constantly changing and I'm constantly having to learn new stuff. And I love that. It's not the same with like math or English, right? So that's why with cybersecurity policies, we have to make sure that they are easily changed. Enforceable. This means that controls can be used to support and enforce the policy that exists. So this may mean that there are technical, administrative, or physical controls that are put in place in order to support the policy. So this is to help make sure that compliance can be measured. So if, for example, I told you on the first day that phones have to be put away during class or during any time that you're watching my lectures, right? But if, say, I was able to see that you were on your phone the whole entire time, but I don't say anything about it, I don't enforce it, do you think everyone else around you who was in my class or in a Zoom meeting, whatever, would continue to adhere to my policy and listen to my policy? Probably not. Be like, oh, well, so-and-so can get away with having their phone out during a lecture, right? So I can too. You have to make sure that it is enforceable so my policy doesn't become meaningless. And then inclusive. So the policy scope includes all relevant parties. So this means that you will need to look at other parties that you're working with. Does your company outsource? What type of controls, if any, do they have? Does your policy take organization objectives, international law, if you're working outside the U.S., cultural norms, environmental impact, and global cybersecurity threats into consideration? So that's what inclusive means. Okay, so defining the role of policy in government. So government regulation is required to protect its critical infrastructure and citizens. So this would be the finance industry. This would be our water supply, our electric grid, everything like that. There's so many. I can't name them all off the top of my head. But we have policies that are meant to protect those. So along with that, there were two major cybersecurity related laws that were passed in the 90s. GLBA, which is the Graham-Leach-Bliley, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, Act. So the GLBA was meant to reform and modernize the banking industry. It allowed banks to open their doors to a wide range of things, including insurance and securities brokering. But when they did this, there was some concern with that information that these banks would be carrying from their customers. So in 2003, GLBA required that these companies, these banks, these financial institutions offer any of these banking products to ensure that they had security and confidentiality ensured to their customers' information and records. It also required them to protect against any threats to security or the integrity of these records. Now, keep in mind, this was in 2003, right? So computers weren't as common as they are now, so there probably wasn't as many threats, right? Cybersecurity has changed so much since 2003. So next, let's talk about HIPAA really quick. So HIPAA, very similar to GLBA, but with health records. With HIPAA, any place that stores or uses EPHI or electronic personal health information must publish their comprehensive cybersecurity policies and detail how their information, the customer's information, to be exact, is protected. So, just kind of some changes that have been more notable. Obviously, as we go on, people are learning how important these policies are, right? States that have become leaders. So California was the first one to enact the Consumer Cybersecurity Notification. So it was SB 1386, which is the California Security Breach Information Act. So before this, there really wasn't any consumer cybersecurity notification that had been in place. So this was meant to protect NPPI. So NPPI is non-public personally identifiable information. So this would be your phone number. This would be your social security number, your last name, your street address, insurance policy number, any of that stuff that could identify who you are as a person. So any information that were to leak out that could be detrimental to your finances, to when someone stealing your identity. There you go. So yes, before this, there really wasn't any law or act that was put in place. So now, with this Information Act, companies were required to let their customers, or essentially not their customers, but essentially California residents, know if their information had been compromised or hacked. So they had to do that in order that they comply. But before that, they didn't have to do anything. Let's see. So Massachusetts then, they were also kind of one of the first states to require the protection of personally identifiable information. So California, they put out the act that you have to be notified, right? Your company has to notify you if your information has been leaked. Massachusetts made it so that your information had to be protected. So this information had to have safeguards, including security policies, encryption, risk assessments, security monitoring, authentication, access control, and so on. So that's what Massachusetts did. And then the federal banking regulations. So we have the FRB, OCC, and FDIC. So these institutions have consolidated assets of $50 billion and critical financial infrastructure. So pretty much if these were to collapse from an incident or failure, it would pretty much ruin the soundness of financial systems and markets all over over here in the United States. And we will actually be covering these more. Government cybersecurity regulations and other companies. So we have ENISA, which was created to raise awareness of network and information security for the European Union. NIS directive was put in place to maintain a higher level of security in the European Union. It was also created to maintain a single standard for data protection among all members of the European Union. So when thinking of GDPR and how they are protecting the entire European Union, do you think that the United States as a whole should have done something like this rather than wait for individual states to implement, like we talked about with Massachusetts and California? Personal question. Okay, so cybersecurity policy lifecycle. So the success of a policy isn't so much concerned about whether they are guiding principles of regulatory requirements, but more on how an organization approaches development, publishing, adopting, and reviewing their policy. So if you want to take a look at page 23 in your book, you'll see table 1-1, and it goes more into depth about all of this. So with development, what should be done before you start writing out your policy? Okay, so that's what we're talking about with development. You don't want to create a policy just to create a policy. That's going to make your policy meaningless. Okay, so you're going to plan, research, write, vet, approve, and authorize. Publishing. So leaders of the company have to be involved and present. More of a do as I do than do as I say, not as I do. Meaning that your top leaders need to be actively involved in setting a good example and adhering to your policies. And you're going to also want to make your policies available to all your users. Don't lock them up. Seems self-explanatory, but there are so many companies that actually do. And then training. So think of an introduction, or even just introducing these security policies that you've come up with as a teaching opportunity to your employees, to build awareness and maybe even make a connection with these employees. Then we're going to adopt. So once the policy has been announced and you have let employees know the need for the policy, now is the time to start implementing your policy. So make sure that everyone is involved and understands how the policy will be applied. Is there something that may need to be purchased for maybe administrative, physical, or technical controls? Is there a place where said exceptions, either temporary or permanent, need to be granted? This is a time for that to be communicated. After it's been implemented, then you need to monitor your effectiveness. And you can monitor your effectiveness with either doing manual metrics or even feedback from employees. And then you need to enforce your policy. So unless otherwise noted via an exception, then you need to make sure you keep enforcement consistent. Like we talked about just a little bit ago, nothing is worse than not enforcing a policy. Even if you don't feel like it, you still need to enforce it. So if so-and-so has their phone out, I need to tell them, no, the class policy is no phones out, put it away. And then the next time I have another student that's sitting over here, phone out, I need to be consistent. Nope, I told you, class policy, no phone, put it away. And then review. So get feedback from internal and external sources. Policies that have become outdated need to be refreshed or retired. Annual reviews of all policies should be taking place for sure. Always review them. They may not need to be changed every year, but they still need to be reviewed every year to make sure they don't need to be changed. Okay, I will let you go through the summary. It's the same summary that's in the back of your book. So I will let you do that on your own. That is all I have for you for Chapter 1 lecture. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me. Other than that, have a good day.